Well, we've seen a lot of panicking on the Tories about reform, of course, this week. But this one is very interesting because this comes from someone in the Michael Gove sphere of influence. Because remember, even though Michael Gove is sort of still out there, his power within the Conservative Party is questionable. Many, of course, believe that Kemi Badenoch is actually his little puppet dancing to his tune. I don't really think she is, given the direction that she's been going in. However, one thing Michael Gove, of course, did make was his own think tank called Onward. Yes, onward, ever onwards. However, it has become something of an anathema, of course, to many of the different Conservatives. They either really like the stuff that Onward does because it, sort of proves their point, backs them up for some stuff, and then other stuff they turn around and just go, "Oh no, that's not true." One of the things that happened, as of course, during the conference was that Onward did release a post-mortem. In fact, they were the only, so far still, the only Conservative think tank to release a post-mortem, mostly because all the other seeming sides of the Conservative Party have bought into the belief that Britain is just secretly yearning for Conservative government. But there you go. Meanwhile, of course, Onward have been doing some generally pretty good in research into sort of why they lost, how they lost. But interestingly enough, now you've got this guy, a guy called, let me get it, a guy called Sebastian Payne. And he is someone part of Onwards and part of his think tank. And he is saying that the Tories just have 6 months to save the party. And of course, what happens in 6 months is going to be the local elections. I've said this before. I think for the Tories, it's going to be a disaster. But I don't necessarily think that it's going to be good for reform. I think the biggest beneficiaries of this are going to be the Lib Dems. But I do agree that you may see some councils get either reform majorities, it'll be a slim, or there will be a couple of reform councils out there. And then good luck in the actual ruling, guys, because I'm totally sure that, as we've seen in the past, when populists take power, they do everything completely right and nothing goes wrong for them. But anyway, let's get going into this because I think this is actually quite an interesting overview is worth exploring because it's from a different side of the Tory party that we really haven't explored before from this. So we're going to have a look into this and see what he has to say about this. So before we do go get into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there's the Patreon page. There's one station link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. And thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel. Happy Christmas, etc. It is the Festivus period. So Merry Festivus period to you all. So anyway, let's crack on, of course, with this. So 6 months to save the party. So, where is Nigel Farage? When in doubt, a good assumption is, of course, he's in America, doing all he can to support his comrade Donald Trump. He might, of course, be making a home to cameo videos to provide at least some helpful extra income, as we learned from his first filings to his parliamentary authorities. He also might be in the GB News studio that provides the vast bulk of his earnings. Bear in mind, if you saw very recently, GB News sacked a lot of its presenters. They got rid of Eamon Holmes. They've got rid of Rees-Mogg. And the suggestions that there could be more on the way, because that is a place is hemorrhaging money. I don't think they will keep Nigel Farage, to be honest. I think if he wasn't an MP, I don't think they would keep him. But we'll see what happens in the future. But again, still not good news for GBBs. So there is, of course, even a chance they actually might be in Clacton, the constituency he was, of course, elected to, despite having said he's had very little desire to obviously spend every Friday there. But it will not be a long one before he is now back on the stump. The general election was, of course, only 6 weeks ago, but we shouldn't overlook the fact that Reform UK made a historic breakthrough. With 5 MPs on the Green benches, Farage Army succeeded in splitting the right-leaning vote of the UK to a cataclysmic degree. Again, written in, of course, in the aftermath of the general election. Of course, 6 weeks ago. The general election wasn't 6 weeks ago, but there you go. There are, of course, now dozens of constituencies in that the Conservatives did lose by at least 3 to 4 margin figures, even taking into account the Reform vote does not entirely yield from the Tories. The party could have easily returned a seat, or at least closer to 200, had it not been, of course, for Farage's return. Many Conservatives are, of course, now blithely confident the Reform vote will now automatically return to them at the next election, when the party's most acute legacy changes over the last 14 years have now drifted, of course, into recent history. But what if it doesn't? I've been saying this before. Why are they just going to come back to you? It's not a guarantee. What if he says this is a permanent schism on the right that echoes the centre-left split between the Labour and, of course, the Liberal Democrats? There is now a real and present risk that what we saw in 2024 could become permanent, with a deep degree of consequences for any Conservative hopes of now regaining office. Reform has, of course, made it clear that they are serious about trying to become a serious political party. GB News even reported that 70 of its local organisers had gathered in Westminster to agree plans to dethrone Farage as a one-man ringleader and to transform Reform into something very different. Chairman Zaya Youfis claimed that it was no longer a pressure group and a new structure was being born to ensure that we are going to be here to stay. Bear in mind, that hasn't happened. At least, not yet. Ben Habib left the party because of this very recently. Just last month, late last month, I believe it was. So, yeah, that hasn't happened. It is still a one-man band led by Farage. So Farage has, of course, given up his controlling interest in the party's holdings company. And of course, Zoufès has, of course, said members will be able to vote, even to oust the party leader. All of this does suggest that Reform is serious about securing itself as a permanent part of the political system, even if it cannot escape Farage's shadow. Again, none of that change has happened yet. But of course, there is a deadline. Next May, and this is what we go to see, these polls. Next May, England will go to the polls again. And some 21 councils in England will have all their seats now up for grabs. Well, 9 unitary authorities will be up for election, plus 2 new metro mayors will also be elected for the first time. So there you go. The prize is up there. 21 councils, 9 unitary authorities, 2 new regional mayors. How is that going to shape out? How is that going to fall out? Who is going to grab those seats? That is and will be the single biggest moment of repel, because remember, last time, but also bear in mind, these 2 new metro mayors are new. Bear in mind, Ben Houchen still out there on his lonesome, the only Conservative metro mayor there is. Will they win a new metro mayor? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them. Very difficult indeed. And like I say, I think the big winner of this will be the Lib Dems. But why is this so important? Because this was the last time those seats, those councils were up for vote was the 2021. That was the big last moment the Conservatives actually won big. That was the Boris Johnson vaccine boost year. After that, it was all downhill from there. So this is like really the remainder of the party's last hurrah before well, Boris, decided to just throw it away even more. But there you go. So back to this. For Conservatives, of course, the peril is great. All but 2 of the county councils up for election are, of course, currently Tory held. The other 2 are, of course, in overall no control, while 7 out of the 9 unitary authorities are, of course, presently blue, with the Tories polling at least remaining below the 20s, nationally behind Reform. According to one recent poll, the prospect of the loss is very clear. Reform will, of course, be ready to pounce, and it has already been campaigning and has the infrastructure in place. Whoever is, of course, elected the next leader of the opposition will therefore have barely 6 months to get the Tory whip and the party into shape. Bear in mind, Kemi Badenoch has been in power since, like I say, 2nd of November. Nothing has fundamentally changed in the Conservative Party. Nothing has fundamentally changed. She hasn't changed anything. She hasn't done anything. So really, she's got 5 months very soon to try and do something about this. So, all at least of the six contenders to succeed Rishi Sunak have spoken, of course, about reforming the Conservatives' campaigning infrastructure. For too long, it was spent thinking about 2028 or even 2029. However, it has not thought enough about 2025, and they might, of course, find their tenure as leader short-lived. What an interesting prediction. What a very interesting prediction there. So, when it comes to, of course, former leadership hustings, there are, of course, some ideas that need to be debated. First, of course, Conservative HQ needs to be repopulated and prepared for the local elections. It is natural for the infrastructure to shrink out of the general election cycle, but the right campaign team and the managers need to be in place for at least the county and unitary elections. Leaving it entirely now to local volunteers, completely demoralized and dejected after the election loss, would be a mistake. So far, that is what has happened. Again, potence of doom that's spoken last month, or at least a couple of months ago now. Very, very worrying for, I think, so a lot of those Conservatives. Very worried indeed. Second, of course, urgent thinking needs to be done on formulating a response to the Labour government. Whether it is, of course, actually dishing out public inflation-busting pay rises to the public sector, toying with curtailing freedom of speech, introducing political appointees to the highest levels of civil service, or even making very wrong-headed decisions on our emergency security. The case against Starmer is apparent. Again, disagree with that. But what is the Conservative response? Or at least what has the Conservative response been from Kemi Badenoch? It's been to make a very cringy speech in Washington and make jokes about biscuits and sandwiches. Wow. What a response. What a response indeed from Kemi Badenoch. But it also needs to be honest and articulated with the beginnings of what a coherent alternative actually looks like. And again, that hasn't happened. It has not been honest. Hasn't even been look at itself. Some individual shadow ministers are, of course, trying to hold the government accountable, such as the shadow science secretary Andrew Griffith, but it needs, of course, a new charismatic leader to actually lead the way. Third, the Conservatives, again, charismatic leader. Kemi Badenoch has not shown that she is that. Third, of course, the Conservatives need to work out an answer to the reform question. Again, Kemi Badenoch has not done that either. Why, after, of course, 14 years in powers, should disgruntled voters look to back the Conservatives when it comes to those elections? The reform campaign next May could quite easily be councils are broke, council tax is too high, and local services are struggling. They may very well do that. What's Kemi Badenoch's response going to be? What's her campaign staff going to be? Bear in mind, as far as we're aware, most of it is still the leftovers from Rishi Sunak's time when he was running for the general election. Gee, how well do you think the May local elections are going to go? Local government, of course, is ripe to be taken over by a populist campaign if reform does get its boots on the ground. And if the next leader of the opposition fails to articulate the case for the centre-right, again, she's not articulated the case for centre-right, and Farage, of course, will gain a serious foothold at the next May, the Conservative headaches will become much worse. Depending, of course, deciding what opposition is, of course, is the place for comfortable obscurity for the next few years would be disaster. Bear in mind, this was written back in August. Some of these things have been very, very pathetic. They've come through. He is right on some of those points. I think I think they're right. I think they have. Time is ticking. I've said this before. Time is ticking for Kemi Badenoch. What's she going to do? We're already seeing Conservative MPs panic. Already. I think it's only going to increase after Christmas. And the closer we get to the general election, the May local elections, I think that's only going to increase. Trouble ahead. Trouble ahead massively for Kemi Badenoch. That is for sure. So, as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.